My name is Barry Weller, and I'm a professor emeritus of the University of Utah's English department. I'm responding at rather short notice to the Tanner Center's invitation to provide a brief introduction to the National Theater's screening of Coriolanus. My remarks may therefore be a little sketchy, but I hope I can say at least a few words to help bring you into the distinctive combative world of Coriolanus. Coriolanus is a product of Shakespeare's maturity, either the last or next to last of his tragedies, dating from about 1607 to 1608. It has striking language, memorable characters, and strong situations. So why is it less well known and certainly less popular than nearly all his other tragedies? It is the third of Shakespeare's Roman plays, written soon after Antony and Cleopatra, but Coriolanus represents the earliest moment in the history of Rome. It is the only Roman play set during the Roman Republic, and it arguably shows the seeds of that republic's eventual destruction soon after the assassination of Julius Caesar, although that's 450 years in the future. At the heart of the play is the conflict between the patricians, the hereditary aristocratic class of Rome, and the plebeians, the ordinary working class citizens. Caius Marcius, later known as Coriolanus, is the patrician par excellence, and in his own view, the Roman par excellence. You can gauge his attitude toward the plebeians from the first words he utters in Act 1, when he addresses them as dissentious rogues, that rubbing the poor itch of your opinion make yourselves scabs. So you can see at once why Coriolanus might not be the most appealing tragic hero. And the plebeians have good reason for their discontent. Rome is suffering from a famine, and while the patricians tell the plebeians to blame the gods, the plebeians accuse the patricians of hoarding grain. Some scholars think Shakespeare was responding to English food riots in the 1590s, and the Midlands Uprising of 1608 may have been an even more immediate inspiration. In the first scene of the play, a more sympathetic patrician, Menenius, a friend and father figure to Coriolanus, tells the crowd a fable about the rebellion of the body's members against the belly, which may look as though it's taking the general food supply for itself, but which actually stores and distributes nourishment to the heart, the brains, the nerves, and all the other organs of the body. The senators of Rome, Menenius concludes, are this good belly, and you the mutinous members. Not surprisingly, the plebeians are skeptical about this analogy, but this metaphorical debate is interrupted by a crisis. The Volscians, a neighboring people who contest Rome's right to Italian territory, are up in arms. The patrician general Cominius leads the Romans against the Volscians, but the undisputed hero of the war is Caius Marcius. He single-handedly captures the Volscian city of Coriolanus and thus acquires the new honorific name Coriolanus. Much of the first act is devoted to showing what a superb soldier Coriolanus is. When he returns a hero, the patricians all expect him to be named a consul, the highest elective office in Rome, and one which, for a couple of centuries to come, belonged exclusively to patricians. The consuls, there were two, were elected for one-year terms, but their election required the consent of the plebeians. When Coriolanus asks a citizen the price of his vote, the citizen replies, "The price is to ask it kindly." But this is precisely what Coriolanus cannot do. He says it is his own desert, not his desire, that has brought him to the forum. Quote, "'Twas never yet my desire to trouble the poor with begging." In other words, he finds it humiliating to stand in the marketplace, candidatus, which means wearing the white robe of the candidate, as though only the people can decide whether he truly deserves to be consul. In fact, they grudgingly give him their franchises, but the tribunes, another pair of officials who represent the power of the plebeians, and whom the play represents as scheming demagogues, stir them up to revoke their votes and eventually incite the assembly to exile Coriolanus as an enemy of the people. So within an act, Coriolanus' status has changed from the savior of Rome to a threat to her liberty. There are all kinds of issues to sort through here. Are the qualities that a nation needs from a wartime leader antithetical to those he expects from a ruler in peacetime? Is Coriolanus's military prowess even a qualification to govern? Encountering Menenius's fable, a citizen calls the soldier our arm, that is, an instrument of the state, not part of its deliberative functions. Do the requirements of democratic, small d, politics require candidates to do things that degrade their dignity, and thus the dignity of the office they are seeking? We jokingly refer to candidates kissing babies, but that is surely the least of what we expect our politicians to do. I suspect that one reason this tragedy has often made playgoers uncomfortable is not just that the character of Coriolanus is anti-democratic, but the play itself seems anti-democratic, with its depiction of Rome's population as a fickle, easily manipulated mob, and their ostensible advocates, the tribunes, as self-serving opportunists. You'll have to decide for yourself where the balance of our sympathies should lie. The Marxist playwright Bertolt Brecht wanted to produce his own version of Coriolanus in the 1950s, presumably to make a stronger case for the plebeians, but he never got around to finishing it. The other patricians don't disagree with Coriolanus's view of Rome's political process, much less his view of the plebeians, but they don't see why he refuses to go through the motions to give the crowd what it wants. His mother Volumnia tells him, "You are too absolute." And she gives him stage directions about how to behave before the voters. Coriolanus disdains this kind of performance and repudiates the very idea of politics as theater. In fact, I think he repudiates the idea of theater itself. Does Coriolanus's refusal show integrity or merely intransigence? His Volscian counterpart, the general Aufidius, identifies the defect of his character as not to be other than one thing. Say that again, not to be other than one thing, commanding peace even with the same austerity and garb as he controlled the war. We sometimes admire characters who refuse to say what they're expected to, Cordelia, for instance, but most of us will, like Volumnia and Aufidius, find Coriolanus too absolute, a bit too consistent in his principled approach, even as the circumstances vary. Coriolanus is assuredly no Cordelia. And I wonder whether the Don Mar Warehouse, the theater that's the actual source of the production the National Theater is streaming, meant to temper his harshness by casting an actor with Tom Hiddleston's charm in the leading role. I myself have trouble seeing Hiddleston as a formidable warrior. Early in the play, a family friend describes Coriolanus' young son, a very pretty boy, as catching and then tearing a butterfly to pieces. The boy's grandmother, Coriolanus' mother, approvingly remarks on the resemblance of his destructiveness to his father's. Coriolanus is at his most eloquent when he's spewing invective. Exiled from Rome, he declares, "I banish you. Despising for you, the city, thus I turn my back. There is a world elsewhere." Just as Coriolanus predicted, the Volscians will renew their war, and the Romans will need him again. In fact, he seeks refuge among the Volscians, seeing their general Aufidius as his only worthy antagonist. Aufidius welcomes him with erotic enthusiasm. "Thou noble thing, more dances my rapt heart than when I first my wedded mistress saw bestride my threshold." Coriolanus will return to Rome at the head of the conquering Volscian army and threaten to destroy the city itself. I don't want to say too much about how this part of the tragedy plays out, but the role of Coriolanus' family is crucial, and their mere existence gives the lie to his belief that he is a wholly autonomous, self-determined being. Thus far, I've only incidentally mentioned one of the most compelling characters in the drama and one of the most forceful women characters in Shakespeare, Coriolanus' mother, Volumnia. I think even the way her name rolls off the tongue is impressive. She describes how she trained her only son to be a perfect Roman war machine. "Death, that dark spirit in his nervy arm doth lie, which being advanced declines, and then men die." Coriolanus' wife, Virgilia, is a more typical Roman matron, whom her father addresses as "my gracious silence." So we know how Roman wives are supposed to behave. When Virgilia recoils from the prospect of Coriolanus' wounds, Volumnia declares, "The breasts of Hecuba, when she did suckle Hector, looked not lovelier than Hector's forehead when it spit forth blood at Grecian sword. She frankly urges Coriolanus to lie to the plebeians. Now, this no more dishonors you at all than to take in a town with gentle words, which else would put you to your fortune and the hazard of much blood. Coriolanus is baffled that his mother of all people doesn't understand his refusal to compromise, but obviously Volumnia has a somewhat flexible idea of honor. She has molded her son from her very womb to be the soldier that he is, but she tells him, "Thou shalt no sooner march to assault thy country than to tread upon thy mother's womb." If there were any doubt, the conclusion of the play makes it clear she is a better Roman than a mother, and Coriolanus accurately predicts that her victory for Rome will come at his expense. I should alert you to the fact that compared to other tragedies, the play ends rather abruptly. The endings of other tragedies typically put the protagonist's failures in the best available light, or find some redeeming trait. The brutally efficient end of Coriolanus leaves little room for eloquence. Almost the last thing Coriolanus says is, "Alone I did it," which goes to the very core of his problematic career and self-conception. It is followed only by his indignant exclamation, "Boy!" And by the end of the play, you will understand why he is so deeply wounded when his old enemy and sometime friend Aufidius calls him, "Thou boy of tears." If you're intrigued by this problematic play, and problem play is one of the categories to which wishy-washy critics have assigned it, I can also recommend the 2011 film with Ralph Fiennes that transposes the action to a contemporary setting of war in the Balkans. I wish that I could be there with you in person to field any questions you may have, or even better, to hear how you react to this production of the play. I hope you'll welcome the opportunity to encounter a challenging play that may expand your sense of Shakespearean drama.